This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hamilton.
You get the weirdest accents every time we talk. It's like you don't really know who you are. I don't know who you are. It's a game that we guess, right?
It's identity crisis time, but yeah.
Maybe we can say that it goes back to your days as a pilot, right? You never knew where you were, so you had to just kind of blend in, right?
It's my creative license. It's my expression. Some people woodwork. I make weird sounds on the podcast.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Just
okay. Don't get weird on me. Episode 93, and we welcome to the show Chris Barker, Projects Chair for the Wild Sheep Society BC, a man that I consider a friend, a mentor. He brought me into, actually didn't bring me into the society, but he's certainly been a big mentor and big supporter from the get-go, and just a force for wild sheep. And he's been doing it for decades. It's if not, like, you know, sometimes in the wild sheep world, you know, stuff happens and you just kind of, you know, your energy levels are not as high as they always are. Chris is always going at it 100%, always fired up. And so if ever I'm having kind of a slow day or a low energy day, just call Chris up and he gets me fired up.
Yeah. We call those a God damn it Steve day. Those ones.
GDS day. Right.
See, you even got an acronym. I knew it.
Yeah.
I thought this episode was great. Our members always ask where their money goes, and Chris digs right into it being the projects chair. He throws some numbers that I've heard before, but when you actually break them down and it's like, holy crap, those dollars go a long, long way and they have a meaningful impact. And every time I speak with Chris, we always have a great conversation. And when we get a chance to do things like this, you just learn so much. And as he said, he's been doing this for decades, not to date him, as he says, but he's been doing this a hell of a long time. He's one of the founders of the society itself, right? He knows his shit. He knows his sheep.
Yeah, I think he served as president for 10 years.
Something like that.
Ridiculous number. Yeah. It's, and the one thing I've always respected about Chris is his respect for the members. I subscribe to that too. Don't get me wrong, but you know, Chris has always gone the extra length to, you know, making sure our members' dollars are well spent, that we're, you know, making really sound financial decisions, because we know how much our members trust us with their money. We've gained that license from them to put that money on the ground. And I know Chris takes that very seriously, as our entire board does, don't get me wrong. But that's one thing that you'll hear Chris talk about it on this podcast, and he talks about it lots on our board calls, is just being accountable for our members' money, you know. And I'm the same way, you know, and I learned this from Chris, is that I got to be able to stand up at our AGM and defend every single decision we make. And if we can't do that with the utmost confidence, then we shouldn't be spending that money, right? And that's come from Chris, that leadership, and it's he talks about lots on our board calls, and I think it's a good thing to live by, right? Because you don't want to be standing in front of the AGM hiding behind a decision, going, yeah, we shouldn't have spent the money there. That's not a good idea. So, and Chris talks about the importance of, you know, making sure our members come first, because they're the ones paying the bills on this. They're the ones that are investing, and we're there at their behest. Our board of directors are elected by our members, and we're there serving them. They're our constituents and the ones that we have to be accountable to, right?
And that's what it's all about, right? We're a membership-based organization. Ultimately, you guys call the shots. And as Kyle said, it's easy to get up there when we know we've made the right decisions based on your input. So it was a great conversation, as we always have with Chris, and learned a ton as always.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, you know, his knowledge of projects and what we're doing on the landscape, his vision, like, you know, I remember when I first got involved, you know, our project list was substantially smaller, but Chris has always had this vision, right? And he's always had these ideas and concepts of where he wants to take it. And and that vision and leadership has been a big part of why we're at where we are today. So yeah, it's fun just to sit down and talk to them and talk about these big projects that we've been involved in, where the money's going, the different regions we're spending money in, and the great work that's being done for wild sheep. Pretty cool.
Yeah, some pretty staggering dollar amounts.
Yeah. So on that note, for our members, we talked about on the last podcast, we've got the 5 raffles currently going. We encourage you to continue to support, because as Chris points out in this, the money from those raffles, our gaming funds have to go to specific prescribed things. So you can't take them. We can't use them to go to Reno for Sheep Week. We can't use them for things that are not that are approved by gaming. So our projects specifically come from our gaming account. So when we write a check for a northern burn, like we did this year for $100,000, that comes from our gaming account. Our members' dollars through raffle purchases are funding that. So we got those 5 raffles on right now. The one campfire raffle, that's a new one. Very, very cool package. And then we've got 4 other great new raffles on our website. So if you're wondering how you can support our conservation work, that's a great opportunity to do so.
Yeah, easy. It's you click a link, you type in your vitals, give your credit card info, and it's done. $25 may not seem like a lot, but when you add it up at the end of the year with everybody else that's chipping in $25, $30, $40, it as you can see, it does a ton of stuff on the landscape as we get into in this chat with Chris.
Yeah, Mike Schroeder used to say this with our wild sheep raffles: conservation plus opportunity, right? So yeah, we're supporting conservation and an opportunity to win some kick butt prizes, and the prize packages are cool. Like there's a ton of great prizes there with $60,000-$70,000 in prizes between the 5 packages. Something like that. It's maybe not quite that high, but really, really good opportunity, and you're supporting a great cause. So pick up some tickets, support conservation, and with that, we're going to send you over to episode 93 with Projects Chair, Wild Sheep Society BC, Chris Barker.
The perception of hunting, has changed. It's our duty now, our responsibility as hunters, to change it back. And we've spent the last few decades trying, espousing that message, preaching that message about wildlife conservation. It's fallen on deaf ears, all of our attempts. I think what we have to do is maybe appeal to the emotional side or the visceral side. We have to tell our story. We know what we are. We know how deeply we care about wildlife. It's just the people out there that are voting to get rid of hunting, they don't understand our stories. Sometimes we have to translate it to something that they understand.
So we've had 92 sessions to talk as sheep, and I don't think we've had Barker on yet. Yeah,
and he's sitting next to you. Like, for those that are listening, they can't see what I can. I've got double the ugly in front of me.
Dougly. Awesome. So, this was hard to put it together. Of course, this is our day job for Steve and I, but Chris is a volunteer. Hardest working guy in the society. Okay, maybe not the hardest, but one of the hardest working guys. He's been at it for almost the longest, maybe not the longest. Bill's there too, but 25 years plus service. And so, I'm probably going to get myself in some hot water with the board on this one. But anyway, we got you here, Chris, and I know that you were balancing your day job and you took time out of work today. So thanks for being here, man.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure.
So 25 years of sheep work, that's a long time, but let's start off with, and I know a lot of our listeners know who you are, but what drives this passion? And like, how did you not get sick of it 22 years ago?
I think it comes back to that giving back piece. Everybody wants to give back, and, how do we continue to give back? And I think as you get older, it becomes stronger. We all love to hunt, but the hunt is part of what we do. And it's not necessarily driven by the success of the hunt or a kill, but it's just about getting out there. So if you're not successful, the trip to me is still a success. And I think volunteerism is the same way, and somewhat a little more rewarding, because you can see the gratification from other people that may not have the knowledge or the time to give back or put in, that thank you for doing what you're doing. And I think it grows within you, and it's like sheep hunting. Once you start, you can't stop. And I've used that old analogy: once you're in, you're not getting out. It's like the mob. So
I feel that.
There it is again, gents.
I feel that one. Without volunteers, though, to be blunt, hunting wouldn't happen, right? And that's a lot of it, right? That's what drives a lot of people, as you said, Chris, to get involved. And then once they're in, they're stuck, right? They realize there's a satisfaction that comes along with giving back. So it's huge.
The one thing I've noticed, though, Chris, with volunteer organizations, there's a real high burnout rate, right? Like, people come in, they're super passionate, they work really hard, and then they do 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then off they go. And I'm new to the game. Steve's relatively new to the game, but you've been doing this for literally decades. And I guess that's one thing I've always kind of recognized and admired in, guys like yourself and Mike Selden, Bill and David. You guys have done this for so long. It's phenomenal that you can continue to keep this up.
Yeah, it's been, like I say, it's been a journey. And I can remember when I started with the Sheep Society, Mike was on the board just before me, and then I got on the board. But sometimes I joke about it a little bit, but I mean, when we first started, I think I had $2,000 or $3,000 for projects in a year after we'd done our convention. And due to some of those members that have come along, had the vision and implemented stuff, it's generated the funds that we can put, $1 million back over the last 3 or 4 years on the ground. So that keeps you going. We've seen the success. We've seen membership. We see other people buying in. And I think it just keeps that passion alive. The other piece of it, too, is the disease thing. And I realized a long time ago that if we were going to have successful wild sheep populations within the province, disease had to be sorted out. And I said once disease was sorted out, policy, legislation, regulation, whatever that looks like, then I could retire.
You realize I've been going to the minister and telling her that you can't sort this out because we can't afford to lose Chris, right? So, okay, maybe that's not true.
You are a true politician.
Okay, so in that vein, Chris, you mentioned projects, and for those that are listening and maybe aren't as familiar as some, talk about your role in the society, I guess, where you fit in on the executive committee, and then the work that you focus on primarily, because we all kind of have our own little areas that we spend our time in. So talk about the work that you're doing, or what's important to you on the board.
So I think, if I go back in time a bit, when I first started on the board, I started off as secretary, kind of treasurer, not my strongest points or roles to be involved, but that's kind of where I ended up. Was president for seven or so years, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Glenn Kunzel, was a great mentor for both me and David and Mike, who passed away. But there's been a lot of mentorship for us that is still here, and we've all been presidents at some point in time. And then it's just kind of evolved, and then I was on the board like you are, Kyle, with WSF, doubling down, so you're doing twice as much. And I backed away from the board a bit when I was doing WSF obligations, and then kind of got out of that and got back into WSSBC priorities, and got back on the board as a director, and then back as I've always been the projects chair for the last 10 years. I don't know, I'd have to count that one up, but and now on the executive as VP, so steering the ship, as they say. But we've got a great board, and I think you'll see some of our board members climbing the ladder and moving into these executive positions, and those old farts will probably wane back a little bit more. But projects is the passion. That's where we put I wear that one on my heart. That one's where we take our memberships, our members' money, our raffle money, and put it back on the ground. And I think it's a huge responsibility, because I think our members are looking to see what WSSBC is doing, how we're doing it, and how we're spending their money. And it's their money we're putting on the ground. So it's a huge responsibility, in my opinion, or that's kind of the way I approach it. to get that on the ground.
Yeah. So who's your favorite board member?
Wow. This sounds like I'm going to get...
No, this was great. I just wish we could use the video of this one just to watch both their eyeballs pop out of their head. That was so worth the question. Continue, Chris. Thanks.
There's a bunch of them there, Steve. Actually, most of the board. I'd just say all the board is my favorite.
Well done. And you say Kyle's a politician.
Yeah. You didn't ask me who my favorite CEO was, so...
Okay, now he's stumped. Now his eyes are popping out.
Oh, no, because I realized I was muted before I said Gray is pretty awesome, isn't he?
Nice. So Chris, let's talk a little bit. So you talked, in the early days having a couple $1,000 left over for projects, and now that's a bit of a game changer. And before we jumped on the podcast here, you and I were looking at some numbers, and I guess that's one thing that has changed over the past few years is we just keep elevating our conservation footprint. So, I guess to start with is how the heck do you do it? Because there's a ton of projects, we get a ton of requests, and there's a lot of money at stake here. Like literally, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and so maybe just touch on I guess. First of all, how you approach this stuff and how you can manage it all, because it's become a bit of a beast with all of the projects.
That was the scary part. I mean, 3 years ago, it was all in my head. And that was even worse, because if something ever did happen, it's gone. So when Sabrina was here, she started a spreadsheet that started to track our projects and money we'd spent in carryovers and so forth. And we started to track where we were with our projects and have a list. So, and it was funny because when we were talking yesterday, I was looking at it going, have you got a sheet somewhere that you can pull up? Because I can't remember everything. And he goes, yeah, we got the spreadsheet. So, Survey's done a great job bringing this spreadsheet up and kind of tracking our funds, where it's going. It just brings that next level of piece of tracking each project. And, each project's broken out by region. Region 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. But, originally it started off where if I had an idea, we'd talk to the regional bios, and, it became an NGO government partnership in a sense, that we were driving projects together and providing the success for the regional bios that they're passionate, but they're limited by what they could do with funds. So those early discussions were with the regional bios and driving stuff. And that's how we keep control of where our members' money is going on the ground, is by having those discussions. We help, for lack of a better word, own those projects. So it's a great way of doing it, to keep it assembled and tracking it. And like you said, Kyle, there's so many now. And like you said, when you're putting $1 million on the ground, and I see our next steps are going to be in, all joking aside, we're $1 million organization this year. I see as being a $2 million organization in 3 or 4 years. We're actually putting maybe not 2 million on the ground, but that's what we're going to be, divesting. And I mean, this year with our partnership money, it's huge, right? I mean, we've got more money in partner funding than we do with our own funding this year. So it's, hats off to you and Serbs for driving that stuff.
Well, I think that's one thing that we do well as an organization is our collaborative approach, right? Like we work closely with sponsors and donors. We look at our 6 conservation partners, how they're driving projects. And then we look at, working with other NGOs, whether it be the Wild Sheep Foundation, probably our strongest ally there, and the great work the foundation's doing across the landscape. But then we work with other partners like Eastern Chapter, Midwest Chapter, Iowa FNAS, and we've had a lot of different organizations, and then even locally in British Columbia, Abbotsford Fish and Game, right? So a ton of collaboration there, and even government funding too. One example is we received a capital gaming grant for $75,000 for that Gataga River project. Well, we had to find partner funding in the amount of $75,000. It was a $150,000 project. We didn't have a ton of skin in the game financially, but we were able to bring everyone together. And without us bringing those organizations together, that we wouldn't have had that funding, right? So I think it's pretty cool.
It's really cool, Kyle. And I think that's the other thing, as our success, and we were putting money on the ground from a WSR, from our raffles, and that's what drives a lot of these projects of our raffle money. People or other organizations see how we get our money on the ground and what we can do for sheep and other wildlife, and I think that just brings it in. So success breeds more success, and it makes it easier when you go talk to our conservation partners and try and hit them up for a decent donation. It's easier for those guys to say, yeah, we want to be part of this. We can see the success. We can see where our money is going to be. We can see the value of the social license piece of it. It just intertwines or nets everything together. And I think the chapter and affiliates, obviously we've had a great relation with the chapters and affiliates over some whiskeys, but those drinks over the table are the ones that usually bring you the success, and that's where you drive even more. And it's one tent, one campfire. Gray's analogy still holds true, and it applies here in BC for sure.
Well, yeah, there's so many things I'd like to touch on there, but I think the one thing that goes back to your earlier statement about bringing these groups together. You look at Abbotsford, that was one of the things when we sat down. I think it was myself and you sat down with Ian Baird, the treasurer of Abbotsford, and they were really excited about it because we talked about matching funds, right? So, Wild Sheep BC would match funds, but we would find others to match funds, and I think we did a 3-to-1 match on their dollars. So they put in $20,000, and that got us $80,000. And I think that's an interesting piece for people when they see that they can turn their $1 into $4. It's pretty powerful, and I think that's one of the strengths. And so kudos to our board for being able to do that and bring these different entities together all for the benefit of wild sheep in BC, right? So
and you talk about those matches and how we create those, and we've done that on numerous projects, and it elevates our skin in the game, and we can turn that $20,000 into $60,000. That's huge. We can accomplish so much. Mm-hmm. I tell a story. I sit on the special sheep permit committee, and I remember we were in Vancouver and Richmond, and we're trying to spend, I want to say it was $130,000 or $170,000 for sheep projects within the province that year. And it just happened to be at the same time that all those trees blew down in Stanley Park, and Jimmy Patterson stepped up and donated $1 million to Stanley Park rejuvenation. And I said, if we had $1 million for sheep projects in the province, we could probably solve all the issues that we had at the time. Even HCTF has grown as well. So, like you said, there's another collaboration there. We've had really good meetings with Dan Buffett and the board. So, just continue to do the outreach, and it drives what we're doing, right? It's all for wild sheep, and it's definitely grown, and it's definitely a business.
Yeah, it is. And hats off to you for your vision. Like these projects, they come from, a place of leadership, and there's tons of support from our board and our projects committee, but it all starts somewhere. And I know you've always got this vision, and it's funny, in the past we've joked about it because you said it's all up here, Kyle. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but what if you die? We're in trouble. So, the cool thing is you've articulated that vision, and now we do have it down on paper. We do have a roadmap forward. And your leadership and your stewardship has been a big part of why we're where we are today on the projects thing, and which creates the confidence by our members to support us and our donors. It just builds on each other, and eventually it just continues to grow, right? And it all comes from that vision. Without that vision, there's none of that, right? So
and it's we start, if we're going to dive into projects a little bit, Region 3 started off as a bit of a vision of how we could reestablish our Fraser River sheep populations. And, prior to jumping on Region 3, I was living in Kelowna and looking at the habitat for sheep in the Okanagan Valley. And it was, obviously winter range is dwindling and so forth. So we instituted some stuff there, and we did some burn plans and, recce assessments, and we were wondering if they were going to come to fruition. And Mother Nature's taking care of a bunch of it. Wildfire took all of our plans and started implementing those, and then that kind of jumped into Region 3, and I'd been talking with Chris Proctor for about 6 to 8 months about, we need to do some health assessments on our Fraser River sheep just to find out if we do have MOVI in those populations, because we were seeing this poor lamb recruitment. And we finally, Chris got it together and started driving it and said we needed to do this. So we did our first assessment, and that's when we found out we had MOVI on the Fraser, and that really started to set that ball in motion and how we were going to move forward with the Fraser. And that assessment really kind of put the vision in place for how long and how big that project was going to be on the treatment side of things. But then it also leads into the habitat side of things. So even though, if we do this treatment and we can get policy and legislation in place to protect the sheep, then you're going into habitat, and then habitat is perpetual. So, a treatment component is going to be, for lack of a better, a one-off. We're going to know where those sheep are living and what habitat they use and at what times. And then we can be target specific with our habitat work. But that's the challenge, is moving into that habitat work and the process that we have to go into that habitat work.
So, Chris, let's talk a little bit about the Fraser River. Like that, what our members have heard about this for a long time, about the Fraser River Health Herd Assessment and Treatment. We've done a film around it, the transmission film, which a lot of our members haven't had the opportunity to see, but will shortly in the next, certainly within the next 6 months. But let's talk a little bit about, that Fraser River project and a huge capital investment for us, a huge capital investment for all the people involved. I think $1.6 million or something like that over the life of the project. It's basically 10 years, but, with close to $500,000 invested so far. So talk about, what's happening on the Fraser, why it's so important, and touching a little bit on what's happening with that project, and maybe what's happening this year on the Fraser, when's that taking place and what does that look like?
Yeah, so if we back it up, so obviously we did the initial assessment to find if MOVI was present with our sheep herds on the Fraser. Once we knew that, then we had to kind of go into this process of what are we going to do. So some people may and may not know, but when we say a treatment, it's not a treatment, it's death. We have to euthanize those sheep if they're MOVI positive. So the first year we did our assessment. The second year we went into the treatment component, and that went in where we had all these volunteers on the ground. We had a helicopter going out and capturing sheep and bringing them back to a central location where we could actually swab them, do a field analysis on them. If they came back MOVI positive, those sheep were euthanized, and I moved on. So Chris picked out the polygons he wanted to work on, and basically we started in the south, on the west side of the Fraser, so just above Lillooet. We were basically one population above, and I can't remember the exact locations of what herds they were. But we did the herd, did the treatment, and I think we euthanized, I know there was 11 sheep in one population. And then the test came the following spring to see what our recruitment levels were. So an example on that population, there was basically zero recruitment in that population prior to this treatment occurring. We euthanized those 11 sheep. Our lamb recruitment was, I think, 22 to 33 in that population. So the sheep that we euthanized were actually recruited the next year by the lamb population. So once we saw that success and we could see that the lambs, and we were getting our carryover and our populations were doing what they were supposed to be doing, then we became target specific on different populations and how they're interconnected, and if we needed to treat this herd and this herd, if they're going to intermingle, we want to make sure we don't get that crossover. So that's how we kind of progressed up the west side of the Fraser. So, 2 years ago we did the first one. The second one was done the year before, or last year, and then this year they did the final piece up to the Chilcotin River. So basically, the west side of the Fraser has been treated. The mountain herds haven't been treated, and we're not 100% what's out there. And if there's MOVI present, we know what we're dealing on the west side of the Fraser. We didn't move into the junction or any of those other populations kind of around there, and those are definitely on our radar. But we use the border of the river as that barrier to stop that those sheep intermingling. So the west side of the Fraser has been treated. Obviously, we monitor our lamb counts, and obviously you had Greg on here, and he's been managing the lamb counts on the Fraser, and hats off to him and sacrificing his weekends doing what he's doing, because we're seeing that information has become really vital to Chris by the time they come to do their fall counts, just to make sure that lamb recruitment is carrying over. So we're seeing that success. We're seeing some numbers. I don't know what the population numbers, if we're seeing that drive up yet, but I guess if I just backed it up one step, original population was 3,500 to 4,000 sheep, and we're down to 850 to 950 on the Fraser. So that's a dramatic reduction. We want to see those numbers come back to those historic levels. So that was the vision piece from 7 years ago, was to reestablish those populations. So this year, as you were just touching on, Kyle, we're going to be starting on the west side around Pavilion. And this is where the really cool thing is we Wild Sheep Society of BC has purchased a drop net. It's actually, Chris has got it in Region 3. And we're going to be using a drop net to capture these sheep, test them, and then hopefully treat the ones that are positive and release the rest, and hopefully start to see that lamb recruitment on the rest on that side. The key piece and the cool part for our members is, depending on how many sheep are there, it's a volunteer opportunity where actually our members are going to be able to come out, volunteer, sign up, potentially get their hands on a sheep while we get this testing piece done. And that is one of the more rewarding things that you're probably going to have to do. And I've been fortunate enough to be involved with a bunch of captures and transplants. I think I've transplanted 100 sheep within the province. And it's more rewarding probably than harvesting a sheep. Maybe not your first one, but definitely if you've shot more than one or two. But the feeling of giving back of that piece is there. So that's going to be a hands-on experience for members and people that get out there just to interact with wild sheep and get up close and personal. So that's definitely something to look forward to in February and March of this year for members to be really involved with.
Very cool. So Chris, let's just, if we could just go back and for those listening, just explain a little bit about the test and remove. So, Movi is present on that Fraser River herd, as we know. You talked about testing and removing them. So there's a couple key pieces. It's only lambs and ewes that we're capturing, right? The rams, we, as a general rule, we don't capture. That's correct?
Yeah, we don't capture the rams because they're usually not around. And we've had discussion around this with Chris, and the rams aren't around the lambs at that time of year. And we're not seeing a lot of sick sheep out on the landscape. So from what we're seeing, it hasn't had any effect on what we're doing with treatment. So yeah, you're totally right, Kyle. It's just lambs and ewes. And basically what's involved is the capture piece, nasal swab, like you get tested for COVID. It's just as deep, just tickles your brain. And then that swab gets put in its vial and it goes off to Sherry, who has a bioamine unit, and she actually takes the swab, dissects it all up, puts it in the solution, and then gets it onto the bioamine unit. Once it's in that bioamine unit, it goes through its process and it gives you a reading of a positive or a negative. But it doesn't come out and say positive. It's like a curve chart. And if it shows this curve going up, it's Movi positive. And then once that results in, so the way we were doing it last year was we were putting a VHF collar on. If they tested positive, then Chris and Ben would go out and actually euthanize that sheep from the helicopter the next day. So it wasn't immediate. We put the VHF on them. If they were positive, we went back. The VHFs fall off within a year. So I'm not sure how we're doing this. I'm going to assume that we're going to have, if we're doing a drop net, we're going to test them. Hopefully we get the results while we've got that sheep, so we're not having to go out back in the helicopter out in a VHF. But that's something that's got to be worked out, and I'm not sure about that one yet.
About the helicopter, is that government or is that private?
That is private, and there's a big shout out right there to Canadian Wildlife Captures and and Ben
Barrikoff.
Just believing in our mission. And then I know I bugged you about this earlier in the year, but I think Ben's, over the capture period, he's donated close. What's the figure?
I can't remember the number. It was like 40 grand or something. It was ridiculous. It wasn't 10. It was in the high tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, like $40,000 to $50,000. So, he's been a great supporter, and believing in the vision and what Wild Sheep Society has been doing, and he's been fantastic with the support. So yeah, it's not a government helicopter; it's Canadian Wildlife Captures. So it's Ben Barrikoff, usually Chris Proctor, net gunner. It's pretty cool. I was fortunate enough to get out there, as well as Peter, to see those guys work. And true professionals in what they do and how they do it on the landscape. And you kind of alluded a bit, Kyle, and I'd be remiss if I missed just some of the funding partners on what it's done to take the success on the Fraser. Originally it started off with just Wild Sheep Society of BC. Jurassic Classic has been a supporter from day one. And I'm not sure the figure that Jurassic's invested in the Fraser, but it's been it's a considerable amount in the hundreds of thousands of dollars again, I think. WSF, HCTF. And really they were our forefront. Midwest chapter's been in from day one. On a 3-year sponsorship initially, and then they just rejoined again for another 3 years. So they've had investments. We kept it kind of a small investment originally, just so we could kind of keep it within our control, but also to make sure that we had the money that Chris could do what he needed to do. And like I said, in the first year or two, having that donation from Ben just pushed it over the top, and we made sure we were able to afford what we were trying to do out there. So those funding partners have been key, and now we've expanded a bit, and Kyle's working on some really cool stuff to perpetuate that. And like I said, once we get the treatments done, we're going to be moving to habitat work, and it'll be more costly than what we're doing on the treatment side of things.
Yeah, so one of the things that I hear often, and I always wondered this myself, Chris, is why aren't we transplanting sheep? Why aren't we moving sheep all over the province? There's all this habitat. How come we're not doing that? And I know some people almost are disappointed that we're not doing that. So why haven't you done a transplant, Chris?
Well, the biggest reason will be disease transmission, and knowing whether you're capturing sheep and actually moving Movi to a healthy sheep population is the biggest reason. And then are we doing more damage by taking sheep from one area and putting them in another area? No, there's not much science on it, but kind of my own theory is usually when we do a capture, you're capturing those lead sheep, those lead ewes that know that where to go at springtime, where to go in the summer, where to go in fall. And then you capture those sheep, you take them away, they usually do okay, but it's that remaining population, they seem to lose that knowledge gap when we do a transplant. And again, I don't think there's much science out, and it's just my observation from Spencer's Bridge. But there's other disease things that we got to be concerned about. But I think disease is the number one reason why we don't do it, that we don't want to spread it. And then what's our healthy, what's our source population? Is it going to be 100% healthy? And do we have the numbers to take sheep from a population? And right now we don't even have the numbers to take sheep from any population within the province and put them anywhere else. So there's the two pieces where we're down in numbers. Granby was potentially a source population, but then with the blue tongue last year, that removed any chance of that happening, and we figured they're Movi-free sheep. Probably the healthiest sheep population right now in the province, apart from our stone sheep, is that California herd on Bear Creek on the west side of Okanagan Lake. And that's one area we need to make sure there's no domestics on that side of that lake, because those sheep are doing really well.
Okay. It was interesting on one of our calls recently on the Fraser River Working Group. That's what Chris said. One of the Fraser River populations was a critically low number, and they're like, we need more sheep. Like, where can we find some? And you were on that call, and Chris like, there's nowhere we can take from. We're just going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul or whatever, right? So it's and then. Yeah, so like you said, the key takeaway there is we can't move sheep around due to disease. But once we get the disease thing solved, hopefully we do, then we're good to go. So we start growing them again. Okay, cool. So, we touched on the Fraser. That's probably our biggest funding source as of late. But we've got some pretty lofty goals here. Do you want to talk about Region 7 and Burns, or what do you want to jump into next, Chris?
Well, still, I think if Region 3, I mean, we've got still a pretty good heavy investment in Region 3 this year. We're doing, we collared sheep on Kamloops Lake last year. Again, WSSBC mostly funded that, so I remember funds on that, along with that purchase on Kamloops Lake. But we're also doing the South Thompson this year. We're looking at sheep collaring there, and we purchased 40 collars to get some collars on the South Thompson. So that's basically south of the highway heading towards Blue River. And then there's going to be a control herd that actually is doing well. We're seeing good lamb recruitment. And we want to use that control herd to compare what's going on in the South Thompson and Kamloops Lake and see if it's habitat. We've ruled it. So and that's the other piece. We've ruled out disease. When we test these sheep. So once we know we're movie free, then we can start looking to see if there's what's limiting these populations if it's not movie. So, big investment in South Thompson this year with that collaring. I think, where's that figure, Kyle? I think it's $40,000 or so for collars.
It was north of 50 for the collars. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, we made that purchase early in the year.
Yeah. And then helicopter time.
Yeah.
So there's helicopter time. And again, we got great funding support again, with partners, WSF, and other groups joining in with us to make that success. So,
yeah, I think Wild Sheep Foundation approved $40,000 US for that South Thompson project. So, yeah, great collaboration and support there for sure. Yeah.
So we're doing, Region 3 is just as strong. And like you kind of alluded to the Burns, where our next big investment is in Region 7, and Josh's vision for the Burns up north is staggering. My hat goes off to him because he's worked his ass off to make that burn happen. I've been on a few of the calls with those guys and what they've been dealing with, and the frustration level. I think I would have lost my shit a long time ago. And so my hat's off to Josh for being persistent to get that done and get that first burn off. That we got off this year is huge. And Josh's vision for $700,000 worth of burns up north is a lofty goal. So he set a challenge for us to raise some funds. We're well on our way. And that figure, WSF, again, a big believer in supporting thin horn sheep populations in BC. And I guess if I kind of go off topic just a bit there, people often wonder where that money is coming from. That's coming from non-resident hunters. That money's raised at WSF and coming back into BC. So when non-resident hunters are here hunting, and what WSF does and raises funds in the US and then brings and invests that into our stone sheep populations is huge. And so their investment, what did they approve of the Burns? 256,000, Kyle, is that the right figure?
I think it was just over 250. So 250 US.
250,000 US for the Burns in Region 7 for stone sheep. Outstanding. And we haven't even, is what, HCTF, WSSBC contributions, and whatever the partners we can kind of dig up now. But like I say, Josh's task is pretty good to move forward. But hopefully that's going to reestablish what's going on in the mountains and start doing that. Obviously there's other things with stone sheep, inventories, get really good information on what we're doing. We do have a bit of baseline health stuff on our most southern populations of stone sheep, which is going to be key to help drive whether they've had movie in the past and they survived it. That serology tells us that. But again, we're looking at habitat. How do we keep these populations? What's our number one priority to maintain or increase stone sheep population? So other than, obviously predator management, but habitat is the key piece there.
Well, so talking to Josh, and you'll have to help me with these numbers, Chris, but we did 4 burn polygons this year. So, and I think we have another 7 approved. So we know that we can do 7 this spring for sure, but Josh is working hard on getting a whole bunch of others approved. I think his vision, I heard a number, you said 750, I heard 800,000 was the budget that he'd hoped to get on the ground this year. And you're like, well, that's pretty ambitious, Josh, but, and we hope we can do that, but very ambitious. But then, Josh said he figured he had 95 or 90 polygons that identified that over the next 10 years we'd like to do. And, you talk to the outfitting community. It's interesting. Wayne Henderson, a good friend of ours, who's on the Wild Sheep Foundation board, he just came back from northern BC and harvested a stone ram. And he said, you talk to any outfitter, they're all saying, if we had millions of dollars, we could spend it all on burns. Like, this stuff is overgrown. Sightlines are compromised. Predators have an easier time. What should be grassy slopes is overgrown with woody stuff that sheep can't graze. And I guess this all comes back to controlling fire, right, on the landscape. It's, we want to squash fire out there because people seem to think it's bad, and we all know it's good for wildlife.
Yeah, it's the best thing for wildlife. And, it comes back to, Josh's vision. And he had this vision, like you said, Kyle, 10 years and those lofty goals. I remember one of my old bosses telling me, a plan without a date is just a dream. And that's so true. If you don't put it into effect, you're never going to achieve your goals. So, again, hats off to Josh for getting this done and having that vision to get these burns. And now we've just got to create the buy-in from everybody and eliminate these roadblocks and get industry on board and say, how do we all work together to achieve what we're doing? Josh is doing a huge job working with First Nations, and that collaboration piece is key to being successful for these burns. And Josh has done a great job again, making sure First Nations are out there and they're actually flying around in the choppers with her. They're doing the counts. They're helping out with the burns. It's that whole collaborative piece that's key to being successful, to make sure that this is going to move forward and continue to move forward. And hopefully we're laying the groundwork, when we are gone, that somebody's going to continue doing this vision piece. Because, like I said, if we get disease sorted out, it's going to come back to habitat work and making sure that not just sheep, but all wildlife's got a place on the landscape, that they've got a place to live. And down south, we see where we're losing it is the key piece, right? We can't create new wintering places. So the habitat's got to be in top-notch condition, and those population objectives need to be met, and make sure we're maintaining those population objectives for a species.
Oh yeah. I was in a place west of town here that had a burn 2 years ago, a really big, hot burn. And I was just scouting it for a hunt that I'm doing next week. And the amount of sight lines that have opened up, it used to be full of nothing but beetle kill and gnarly blowdown. It's gone. We were able to ride ATV through there, and we had to cut down some deadfall that had fallen from the burn, but that the new growth was everywhere. Ungulate tracks. It was like Narnia type thing. Just bright greens that you wouldn't expect. So yeah, burns do have a place, right? Nobody wants to lose infrastructure. So when a burn's in a spot that can handle it and needs it and nothing's at risk, let it go. Monitor it, of course, but we need to put more fire back on the landscape. It's better for everything.
I couldn't agree 100% more with that comment, Stephen. Often we talk about it in the Okanagan, and that's, I kind of alluded a little bit to the Okanagan about when we did those burn plans and those recce assessments. I think we had 12 polygons down there, and they were big. They weren't like the ones that Josh had. I took the whole piece for sheep and said, that's what we need to burn. And then I let John do his work. And Mother Nature's burned all of those 12 polygons. There's one left. Now I'm at a bench, right? So, and I've been bugging them to do put a wildfire break in there. Make that corridor for the sheep, for the wildlife to get above the vineyards, so you don't have that hot fire. And here we are, we're still talking about it. There's nothing in the books for the Naramata Bench, and every other piece. The last one that burned was last year was McLean Creek, right? Perfect fire for sheep.
So with regards to fire, that we've had some members reach out on social when we posted our burns and stuff like that, asking about, well, what are they going to eat in the interim, or, does this affect them, or is it, Josh has said that on some of these fires they've flown it, and I'm not sure if it was weeks or months after of course these are spring burns, but literally within weeks or months, they see sheep back on these pieces of property, on these burns, and there's little shoots of green already up. It's that quick, and they're already feeding on it, right? So really, really fast rejuvenating, and no real adverse effect to sheep from what we've heard for the most part. So pretty positive all around.
Well, just coming back to that, Kyle, like McKay Creek fire, we actually had some callers before that fire occurred, and we actually had GPS points on those sheep, and that fire was going on. Mm. And you're correct. They were back in there 2 weeks after that fire had gone through. They were back in the burn. But from what we gathered, we didn't lose any sheep in that fire. They just kind of ducked out of the way of where the fire was burning, and then they were back on that habitat. And like you say, it's back within 2 weeks. And if you get a rain shower after that, it's like boom. Biggest issue, though, is just making sure that we're monitoring for invasives after these big fires, because we can see a real influx of invasives coming after. And that's another thing that's on our radar. Again, projects in Region 4. Our biggest thing in Region 4 seems to be invasives right now, and managing invasives on high elevation grasslands, which normally you wouldn't think you'd see invasives up there. But, that Bull Mountain burn, we couldn't do that burn until we got rid of the invasives. So we sprayed the invasives. That Bull Mountain burn took place this year. Mm-hmm. So, again, there's these nuances underneath it. Can we get a burn done? And, to members that are concerned about a burn impacting wildlife, we don't see it. Obviously, if you have a real fast moving fire, it can actually, some wildlife gets caught. But from our caller data and stuff, it's been nothing but positive things.
Oh, yeah. Very rarely does wildlife get caught from what we've seen, right? They know it's coming. They get the hell out of the way, and then they come back, as you said, within sometimes hours, sometimes days, sometimes weeks. That's a lot of them. The ones that get caught are the ones that are the terrestrial ones, the ones that are burrowing down, and you get a really hot fire that gets a couple of feet down. Then there's a little bit of collateral loss, but overall, 99% of the stuff gets out of the way. And when you speak about invasives, Chris, what are you referring to? Like, give us any sort of example?
Knapweed's probably the biggest one. We're seeing a lot of cheatgrass invasion in Region 3. And that's kind of one of those pilot projects we're just starting to work on with Bill Jacks, our sheep and goat biologist specialist for the province. Talked to Bill quite a bit about how we can get this pilot project. And again, interestingly enough, we start talking about it, and KIB has already been working on different things to try and manage cheatgrass on the Harper Ranch and their territory there. So again, positive steps forward, and again, collaboration moving forward. Hopefully we can do that. But in the Kootenays, it's knapweed. There's 2 or 3 other species, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I know I should.
I think there's cheatgrass. Yeah, is one of them. Did you say that? And then there's African wiregrass, I think, was the other one that Bill had mentioned. So.
And then there's one more, I think, and I can't remember what it is, Kyle. And
okay.
I know they were spraying for it. So basically, it's pretty intensive to treat invasives. It requires the spraying, and obviously it's, what kind of a pesticide are we using to do that, and all the processes to go through that. But that's been a big thing, and, working with the Elk Valley Invasive Species Council has been a really good, rewarding process moving forward. And Kyle's actually jumped into that one, and has kind of been helping lead that area with Gabriella down there.
Yeah, EKIS does a great job on invasive weeds, and been partnering with them but they've done really well this year. Actually, they got a ton of HCTF funding and stuff, so it's been really good work. So let's jump into some stuff in Region 4, Chris. So Region 4, has a bit of a tinderbox for us. There was a lot of dialogue around LEH, and we're obviously advocating for more government money on the ground for conservation, and instead of pulling the hunting lever again, right? So some of that was misconstrued somehow, that we didn't care about the sheep, we just wanted to go and kill them, which absolutely wasn't true. What we're trying to do is leverage the government to make sure they were spending the funds to ensure the sheep were being rehabilitated. Instead of worrying about harvest procedures, let's focus on the true cause of all these things: highway mortality, cheatgrass, 100 other things. So right from the start, this has been a vision of yours, is to support those sheep in the Kootenays, right? Maybe start off by talking about the number of sheep harvested in the 60s, because you have some stats there that are pretty alarming, actually.
Yeah, it was pretty cool, actually. Stephen Lunenberger, guide outfitter in the Kootenays, sent me a newspaper clipping from 1963 about the whole harvest. So it used to be, the harvest was actually published in the newspaper throughout the province. So, the elk numbers, the sheep numbers this is absolutely amazing. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff. Industries had a lot of impact. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's impacted those numbers. But I think the harvest in 63 was 262 sheep or something.
In Region 4 alone.
In Region 4. And I think, what are we down to, 20? I don't know if it's 25. I think on the last GOS, I'm not counting LEH, but I'm not sure where the numbers are right now. But
so 263 and 265 sheep in
63.
Okay.
Yeah, 1963, when I was born. Just to date myself.
So what are some of the major projects then that we're diving into in 4 then?
So right now in 4, I think the biggest thing is just making sure that whatever we've got for habitat is left that can support these populations, and then we can start to see those numbers. Obviously, working a lot with Irene, the regional bio, she's fantastic to work with. But trying to get, there's no population objectives there. So what number are we trying to manage to? Is it 20? Is it 50? Is it 100? To have a hunting season, and again, it's not about the hunting piece, but we're looking at 75 animals for a hunting season. So to me, I just translate that's a viable population number. If we're looking at 75, that keeps the population, robust, genetics, all that stuff, if that's the number. So what do we need to do in Region 4? Obviously, we're not going to get back to those historic numbers just because the way the habitat's fragmented and that connectivity has been lost. But what can we do? So what is a population objective for Bull Mountain? Is it 60 animals, 70 animals? Let's have that out front and center. So we know, gives us a measurable to say, yeah, what we're doing is being successful and we're meeting our objectives. If the numbers are increasing and we see them increasing, yeah, what we're doing is starting to work. So I think there's some tools there that we need to have in place to manage what we're doing. And like I said, Irene's been good. They've done a bunch of stuff over there. Irene was doing invasive management on wigwam before anybody else. She was doing it herself. She applied to HCTF. I remember seeing her applications coming in, and she was doing it way back when, like 10, 12 years ago. So I think how are we going to interconnect? How are we going to manage that mind piece where we don't really have control of those population numbers? So how do we guarantee that those numbers are going to be there, that we don't lose that habitat? Obviously, they're trying to mine the last piece of high elevation grassland in the Elk Valley, which is going to impact those sheep. So how do we work with industry to get that happen? That to me is a no-go zone. You can't take the last piece of high elevation grasslands out of there. So does it come back to lobbying and habitat protection, making sure our habitat's in good condition, make sure we don't have those invasives, so those sheep have got enough nutrition to get them through the winter? You touched on mortality. How do we limit that highway mortality? I mean, obviously we raised a big stink about it early this year. when it was going on. I know you reached out to that golf course owner to help make sure we had some place to look after those sheep. But how do we stop losing, 25% of our sheep population on a yearly basis due to road mortality? The same thing in Golden, with the highway going in there. We helped Golden Rod and Gun Club get their project off the ground with the collaring process, and that's a population that we're never going to hunt. But it wasn't about the hunting piece; it was about the conservation piece. Those sheep showed up there on themselves, so they came from somewhere else, decided they were going to live there, just because we got the number one running through there, and now we're expanding it. Those sheep took a sacrifice because they did an original transplant out of there. They transplanted them, and they just became bait for predators where they got transplanted to. So I think we really need to look at hard and fast how we can keep our populations where they need to be in the Kootenays. And I think habitat's going to be our number one success there. They're doing some predator stuff. How do we make sure we can kind of control all of that stuff in the Kootenays? And I think it just needs to be on our radar, front and center, 24/7.
Good stuff. Okay, so let's kind of wrap up projects. Is there any other projects you want to talk about? Any other regions? I know we've touched on a few of them, but there's a few we haven't. Is there anything you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think just for members, Region 5 is kind of rolled into Region 3. So whatever we're doing in Region 3 with the treatments will roll into Region 5. Great post we had out about a member reporting a dead sheep that we didn't have any info on, and Region 5 got out there and actually did a necropsy on the mountain and got those samples back in to give us that baseline health on some sheep that we didn't have. Again, our member money, like we were able to react to that as soon as we found out about it. WSSBC funded that helicopter flight to get that out and get that back in. So pretty cool stuff. You're going to see a lot of stuff coming up for Region 8 pretty soon. Just around the Movie side of things. Like we know we've got Movie in the Okanagan. We haven't done any treatments because those sheep are interconnected. We're worried about them crossing the border. And until Washington State and we get on board with one another, and again, huge collaboration between Colville, Confederated Tribes, ONA, our regional bios, Wild Sheep Society of BC, trying to figure out how we can deal with that cross-border and do those treatments. Washington needs to be on side with treating their sheep as well as we do, because those rams are crossing back and forth on the border. So our members are going to see a lot of stuff coming up in Region 8, hopefully next year as that falls out. And then how do we deal with the Seropti stuff in Region 8? So that's probably like a 3 or 4 year project down the road. Like I say, habitat in Region 8's in good shape. We just got to get Moby off the landscape there, and then have that piece of policy legislation to make sure that domestics aren't bringing it back into our sheep populations in 8. Region 6, I know we've heard a bit of criticism. We're not doing much in Region 6, and why aren't we doing anything in 6? And obviously we talk to Bill all the time, and Bill just didn't have anything on his radar. I mean, it's coming. I've been working with Bill a few years, and that's how we jumped to him with Dustin Rowe. Dustin donated a moose hunt to Iowa, and Iowa's donating that money back to us to try and get a fertilizer project off instead of burning in 6, try and do fertilizer to, keep that sheep habitat invigorated. So that one we still haven't quite got off the ground. We've got our soil samples. We just got to come up with that other piece. So Tottigan Burn, I think that got delayed. So there wasn't much going on in 6 that we could actually do anything. Again, we want to be doing a project wherever we've got sheep within the province, and I want to have one sheep project in every region every year. So we're not picking and choosing where we're going. We're doing as much as we can for every population within the province. And I think the only populations we kind of leave out of it is the Dalles in that northwest corner. We haven't, it's not on our radar. I've talked to Bill a bit. He's looking at doing some inventory work in there, but we don't know what else we can do for our Dall sheep. But that kind of sums it up, I guess, of a quick wrap up around the province anyway.
So how much money do you need?
If Jimmy's listening.
What would solve all your problems for wild sheep in the province? I lots of times it's not even the money, right? Like there's, we've been trying, we've had some regulatory constraints on burns. We could have had $10 million. It wouldn't have helped us for the burns, right? So we're getting through that. We're working through that stuff on the regulatory side of things, but it's not always just about the money either, isn't it?
No, it's not. And you know what? If I had the money and I had $10 million in the bank account and we could just spend the spinoff, we would probably be really successful with what we're doing. I think you alluded to a great point, Kyle, about what we have to do within government and how do we get, I guess it's the bureaucrats, how do we get there? We've got to share our vision with those bureaucrats to get this stuff happening. And instead of putting these roadblocks up all the time is the key piece. But I think the piece, we kind of touched on it just a hair, but First Nations collaboration is huge. WSSBC has done a great job with that outreach. We've got great relations with quite a few, bands and nations, ONA and Kaelin Glasser and Addison. And I just saw a text that Addison's moving on. I'm not sure where he's going, but
yeah, I heard that too.
And Hunter, the Together for Wildlife stuff, again, collaboration, intertwining all that piece. If guide outfitters, Wild Sheep Society BC, BC resident hunting organizations, and First Nations were all saying the same thing, government needs to step up and listen to what we're doing on the landscape. We need to remove those roadblocks for wildlife, and that's the ultimate thing. Is we want that wildlife there, and if the non-hunting public wants that wildlife there, then it's up to us to make sure that we get government to do that. And we need to remove those roadblocks and get that engagement. It's frustrating we can't even get a meeting with the minister from Flinrow. And obviously now they split the ministries, and how's that? If we can't get a meeting with one minister, how are we going to get a meeting with two ministers at the same time? So these nuances, in my mind, aren't helping. My opinion, whenever you try and do that, that's just too much. You're dealing with double the bureaucracy below the minister level. And if we can't even get it at the one level, then how are we going to move forward? So that's a real grave concern for me, how we can bring that together. So again, Greg and our governor engagement committee, I think they're going to be busy coming up pretty quick on how we can influence that and how we can provide members an opportunity to make their voices heard. I think that's ultimately what it's about, is we being able to take our members' voices and amplifying those voices is going to be huge.
Yeah. Okay. We could talk projects all day, and I know you've taken time out of your day to do this, but how about hunting? You going hunting this year, or what? You gonna go? You're putting them on the mountain, you taking one off, or what?
Well, everybody, I did do a sheep hunt in August, and everybody asked me how I did, and I said I got a lot of exercise. Coming back to that, we didn't touch on the Gataga project up in Region 7, and you guys touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but 170K on the ground, and it was pretty cool. We got it off, but they decided to pull those barrels out because of the weather. It was they were supposed to do it in July, and there was still snow on the ground, so they ended up doing it in August, and they happened to be flying over where I was sheep hunting with the helicopter, so I don't think it did us any good for finding sheep where we were. So kind of ironic that the projects chair gets helicopter flights over with him with barrels from one of our projects that impacts where those sheep may be.
Yeah, well, yeah.
That's true irony right there.
Yeah, that is irony. Yeah, for sure.
But I think, we got a goat draw together, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too, for sure. So,
and hopefully your insurance policy is up to date, because goats seem to be my nemesis, and I'm not very smart when it comes to goat hunting.
Don't scare me.
Oh man.
Awesome. Well, hey, appreciate you taking the time to meet with us, Chris, and just I guess in closing, is there anything you want to just say to our membership in terms of the support they've given and how important that is for the projects? You've kind of touched on that anyway, but any last thoughts on that? Or
no, I think I'm going to steal. You touched on Wayne earlier, but Wayne from WSF, his mantra was always about our members, and I've adopted that a little bit. And it is about our members, and I think our members need to know what we're doing, where we're going, how we're doing it. And I just can't thank them enough for the support. Our raffles. You guys do a great job putting the raffles together, but you don't have a great raffle if they don't sell. Mm-hmm. And all our raffles sell out, and that's due to our members' support. And that's the money we put on the ground. I'll go back a few years. Mike Schroeder had the vision to kind of put that WSR raffle together, and that was a game changer for how much money the Wild Sheep Society of BC put on the ground, because it freed up all that WSR money went on the ground, and then our convention money just added that bonus piece into it. And because you have a convention, and there's a lot of expenses associated with that convention. We've been able to actually balance that now, and then our convention covers our yearly expenses, and then our member support on raffles and stuff really goes back on the ground. So if a member ever thinks what can they do and how they can do and how they're doing it, keep supporting our raffles. That's our money that's helping sheep, and it goes right on the ground. I don't know what our ratio is, but it's pretty good with the dollar to ratio we get on the ground from every dollar that comes in. How much we get on the ground, I don't know what that is, but
yeah, I don't have that figure.
It's got to be up there.
Yeah.
Just thanks to our members. Once I'm gone, keep supporting Wild Sheep Society BC. If you know somebody that's passionate about wildlife but not into sheep hunting, still get them a membership. Everything we do on the ground helps every other species. So
you're not going anywhere, buddy.
Only in the dirt.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate all you do, Chris, and just your leadership and vision and just your enthusiasm for wild sheep is, sometimes in the racket you kind of get beat up a little bit and you're like dragging, but I always call you and you get me back on my feet and getting after it. So no, we're so grateful for your leadership on this, and I have to say, of all the things we do as a society, I think the one thing we do the best is look after wild sheep in BC, and you're at the very heart of that. You're the guy that's making it happen. So pretty cool.
No, thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Steve. I think, in closing, a bit of a joke kind of there. Kyle, Jeremy, Serbs, you guys always dread when I phone him because it usually means work for him. So
always means
even Hamilton too.
Absolutely. I'm like,
phone's ringing. It's like, okay.
Barker's phoning. Yeah. What's he got?
He's got something for me to do.
Well, like a true projects chair, it's you're good at delegating, right? So
yeah, I do that for real life too.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Chris. Appreciate it, and good to have you on. Let's do it more often.
Yeah. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you.